Welcome back to Beginning Sock Knitting with the Twisted Skein. I'm Amanda Swanson. We're going to continue this week by starting our heel for our socks. I'm going to start off with my sock on the double pointed needles. You can see here I've cast on and knit about 2.5 inches in the round on my DP ends, and we're going to go ahead and start the heel. Now this is pretty simple math. For the average sock, your heel flap is going to incorporate half of your stitches. As I said, I cast on 44 stitches for this sock, so 22 stitches should comprise the total of my heel. I'm going to go ahead, I'm at the beginning of my round, and I am going to go ahead and, as you always do, slip the first stitch purlwise, holding your yarn in back, and then I'm going to knit across until I've worked a total of 22 stitches. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm going to set that needle aside for a moment until I get all of my heel stitches in place here. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And as you can see, this is a little bit tight on my needle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange the needles for the front of my sock, the part that goes over the top of your foot. So what I'm going to do is take this needle here. I should slip these around until I have 11 on each needle. Now I'm not going to be working on these two needles. I'm just going to use these to hold my stitches so it's more comfortable to work. So I should probably put 11 on each needle. Okay, and I slide them up to the middle of my needles so they don't go anywhere. And this leaves my heel free so that I can just work back and forth on it here. There are a couple different schools of thought on ways to work heels. I'm showing you the most basic, which is knit and purl. You always want to slip the first stitch of your heel purlwise. When you're doing it on the wrong side or inside row, you're going to keep that yarn to the front of your work. When you're doing it on the knit side, you're going to keep your yarn to the back of your work. But this is just going to be a basic stockinette heel. And you're going to work exactly as many rows as you have stitches in your heel. Since I have 22 stitches across my heel, I will be working 22 rows of knitting, and that will be approximately square. It might be a little bit longer than square, but that's okay. It gives us a good baseline to aim for. So I'm going to continue purling across my heel stitches, and you're just going to work back and forth, always slipping that first stitch no matter which side of the round you're on. Just slip that first stitch of the row and then either purl if you're on the wrong side or knit if you're on the right side or outside of your sock. And that slip stitch is going to create a little bit of an extra long stitch that we can use when we pick up our heels. All right, so I'll just work this back and forth, and now I'm going to show you how to work with your double pointed needles, keeping the stitches there. And I'll just go back and forth. This is row 3. And I'll continue for a total of 22 rows. While we work on that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my 2 circular needles, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a different heel technique that some people like because they find it makes their heels a little stronger and they last longer. All right. I'll come back once that heel flap is done, and we'll move on to the next step. And I'm back with my heel flaps. You can see this is my slip stitch heel flap on my circular needles. You can see this heel flap pulls in quite a bit from the regular stockinette fabric. It helps shape this over your heel, and also, as I showed you earlier, this double layer fabric that it creates in the back gives your heel a little more stability, and it wears better. It's a little stronger. That's over 22 stitches, 22 rows. And then this is the heel flap that I did in just stockinette stitch. You can see it's very square and it does not pull in, unlike the slip stitch heel. Back looks like regular reverse stockinette. I want you to note though, you can see very clearly here, the edges, because we slipped that first stitch of every row, you can see you have kind of an elongated edge stitch because you only have one stitch for every 2 rows doing that slip. This is where we're going to pick up stitches for our gusset after we finish the next step of this heel. But I wanted you to note that and know that that is intentional. And you can see that it'll be pretty easy to figure out where the stitches will be picked up from that. All right, so the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to do the decreases to help shape the heel. And it's going to be the same on both socks, depending. The type of needle you're using doesn't change how this stitch works. It's done basically flat, so it's going to be the same whether you're using circular needles or whether you're using double pointed needles. So I'm just going to set this sock aside now and demonstrate on the one. So the first thing you want to do is you want to put a marker in the center of your sock heel. Indicate what is halfway across. So I'm going to count, this is 22 stitches across, I'm going to count 11 stitches so that I have 11 stitches on each side. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. I'm going to go ahead and place my marker there. And that's basically the center. Now, what I'm doing is we're going to work just past halfway across. How far you work past the center depends on how many stitches you have in your sock. And you could adjust this a little bit depending on your heel shape. If you had a very wide heel at the back, you may want to use more stitches for the center of your heel that doesn't have decreases in it. Whereas if you have a very narrow heel, you'd want to use fewer stitches for the center of your heel. Generally, the rule of thumb is about 1 inch that is unworked in the center of your heel. So for this sock where I'm knitting 5 stitches or 6 stitches to the inch, you would want that to be about 5 or 6 stitches in the middle. Since I have an even number of stitches in my sock, I'm going to have an even number of stitches that are just knit plain in the center. I'm going to go ahead and, because this is a fairly small sock, just keep 4 stitches in the center that I don't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work 2 stitches past my center marker. If I was knitting at 9 stitches per inch or 10 stitches per inch, I would want more like 10 stitches or 8 stitches in the middle of my heel, and that means that that would be 4 on each side of the marker or even 5 on each side of the marker. I'll leave that a little bit up to your discretion. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and knit to 2 stitches past my center marker, and you'll see how this works as we go along. I'm just knitting, we're not slipping any stitches here now. Slip my marker, and now I'm going to knit 2 stitches. Now I'm going to do a slip, slip, knit, slipping those 2 stitches over, knitting them together, and then I'm going to knit 1 stitch, and then I'm going to turn my work around. Okay, that gives me 2 plain stitches and 1 decrease stitch, and then 1 knit stitch for a total of 4 stitches past my marker. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip the first stitch, I'm going to purl 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, slip my marker, and I want to have the exact same number of stitches worked without decreasing on this side. I went 2 past my marker before. I'm going to go 2 past my marker here. I'm going to purl 2 stitches together. I'm going to purl a stitch. I'm going to turn my work around. Now I'm going to be working, I'm going to slip that first stitch, purlwise tip to tip, and I'm going to knit back across my marker. And you can see over here, I have this gap that forms between the stitch that I slipped and the other stitches. This is going to be where I make my next slip, slip, knit. Knit one stitch, and then turn my work around. Okay. Going to repeat that until I have worked all of the stitches in the row. So I'm going to slip that first stitch purlwise, purl across 4 stitches now. One, 2, 3 stitches, and I'm working until I get to that gap. See the gap? We're going to purl those 2 stitches together, purl 1 stitch after the gap, and turn the work around. Okay, and I will continue working the same until I've worked all the stitches on this sock. Pass the marker. You can see the gap coming up. That's where I'm going to slip, slip, knit. Knit the last stitch and turn. Slip the first stitch purlwise and purl back. All right, you can see that I'm coming to the end of the heel here. This is my gap. I'm going to slip, slip, knit over the gap. I'm going to knit the last stitch on my needle, turn around. I'm going to slip that first stitch as always, and this is considered having worked all the way across the knit rows, and now I'm going to work across my last purl row. Just purl back across the stitches till I come to that gap on the purl side. And you'll find this will be done very quickly. All right, there's my gap. Purl the 2 stitches together, purl and purl. And I have now worked across all of the stitches to make this little heel cup. All right, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how to pick up the stitches on the side of your gusset, and that on the side of your heel flap. And that is intimidating for people, but really the setup we've done will make this easier than you think it is, and we'll have this heel shaped in no time. All right, now that we've formed our heel shaping, I'm going to go ahead and just knit straight across the base of the heel here. I'm going to slip that marker. I'm going to keep that in place because this marker is going to mark the new beginning of the round for my sock at this time. All right, I've gotten to the end of that, and now I'm going to come here and I'm going to pick up stitches. I'm going to look very carefully at the edge of my sock because I want to make sure I'm picking up in the right place. It's very tempting to want to pick up the V's that you see here, but these are not correct because I knit the sock going this direction. My V's should be upright if I'm picking them up. So turning my sock heel out, I can see I've got another set of V's hiding right in here. And I'm going to want to make sure that these are the V's that I pick up. Now I knit 22 rows, slipping the first stitch of every row, so that should give me 11 stitches to pick up. But then I also did this little heel shaping bit, and that gave me 1 extra stitch. So I'm going to pick up round about 12, but I don't really want to leave any gaps, so we'll see where we get. The most important thing is that I'm going to try and pick up the same number of stitches on both sides. So I insert my needle in both legs of that V, and I wrap the yarn around my needle and pull the stitch through. Okay, let me do that again. Go to the next stitch. You can see the next V there. Insert my needle under both legs. Wrap the yarn around my needle so that it's traveling in the correct direction, and pull it through. This is also referred to as picking up and knitting because I'm keeping live yarn going as I pick up these stitches. Next stitch. This is going to make 3. Turn that one out. 4, 5, and you can see by slipping that stitch it makes it really easy to see what I want to pick up. 7, 8. Not quite sure what happened there. That one may not have gotten slipped correctly, but if I look at the side I can see that I have 1 stitch there that I need to pick up. And that one there. All right. If I go back and count, I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 stitches that I've picked up across. That should give me a good even pickup, no gaps. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to switch needles to this needle that's in the front part of the sock across the instep. Slide that needle up. I'm going to pull tight to minimize that gap where I change needles. And I'm going to knit across the instep. Now I want to keep these stitches on the separate circular needle, and you'll see why I'm doing that in a little bit. We're now going to get this sock going in the round again. Come across. Last stitch. All right, I'm going to pull these stitches all the way on to that circular needle. Now watch carefully. I'm going to take the end of the needle I have over here. I'm going to pull these stitches through, and I'm going to bring this end of the needle that's coming out of this side of my heel around. Pull that needle all the way up. And I'm going to take this end here and I'm going to continue picking up stitches. All right, again I'm going to turn the edges out so I can see where I'm going. You'll notice that the V's are going the other direction because we're now picking up on the other side of the heel gusset. I'm going to go ahead and slip my needle through that first slip stitch that I see. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm pulling these stitches pretty tightly. When you pick up stitches, you don't want to leave a lot of slack because it's going to cause gaps along that picked up edge. And I'm also trying to close the gap where I transitioned from the needle for the top of my sock to the needle for my heel. So I'm going to continue picking up. I can see each V there. Again, I'd like to have the same number of stitches on each side so that I have even decreases as I work my sock, but it's, not crucial. The world is not going to end if you have 12 stitches picked up on one side and 13 on the other. It just means you have one more stitch in your sock when you work around. Not the kind of thing to lose sleep over. Okay, and there, and there. Okay, 13, and I am back to where I have the other end of my needle. I'm going to knit across until I get to that marker. As I said, this marker is my new center of round, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle through. Okay, I've got that marker moved over to my left needle. I'm going to pull this needle through and leave the slack off to my right so that I can continue working this way. Now I'm going to begin the next round, and as I come back toward the end of the heel, I'm going to start the shaping for my heel gusset. I'm going to stop 3 stitches before the end of this needle, and I'm going to do my shaping, and you'll see how that works. Okay, I have 3 stitches left here. I'm going to go ahead. This is the end of my heel needle. I'm going to knit 2 stitches together, knit 1, and then I'm at the end of that side of the heel. I'm going to turn my work around here, come up and work the instep stitches on my other needle. Again, trying not to leave any gaps or ladders here. Just knit straight across that front needle. Pull that needle all the way through, and then I'm going to come around and I'm going to work the other side of my heel, and this time I'm going to work my decreases on the first 3 stitches. Pull up my yarn, bring around the correct needle. I don't want to get my needles confused here. I'm going to bring around the needle that I'm using for the heel, which in my case is the blue one. I'm going to knit the first stitch, again tightening up so that I don't have gaps there, and then I'm going to slip, turning those stitches, put them back on my left needle, and knit the 2 together. And that's going to make a mirrored decrease for the other side. Now, these decreases are worked every other row. So I'm going to work back to the beginning of my round, which is where my marker is, and then I'm going to work a row in plain knitting. I'm going to go ahead and continue working that row where I knit from the beginning of round to 3 stitches before the end of the needle. I'm going to do that decrease round every other round. Back to the beginning of my round. This next round is going to be the plain knit round. I'm going to come back and we're going to do that decrease round again in just a minute. Alright, I've worked a couple rounds, alternating the decrease round and the straight knitting round, and I'm about to work another decrease round. I want you to see how this shaping is starting to look. So I'm 3 stitches before the end of my decrease round. You can see I have a row that isn't decreased right before. I'm going to go ahead and knit 2 together, knit 1, and you can see how that line is starting to develop where my decreases are falling. And that's going to continue down to the base of the sock. Alright, I'm ready to switch to the front needle. I'm going to continue working that pattern, decrease round, knit around, alternately, until I have the same number of stitches on my front needle as my back needle. So I had 22 stitches on my front needle, and I want to get my back needle down to 22 stitches as well. So that's going to be a few rounds, and I picked up a couple extras in there so I didn't have gaps on my heels, and I'm just going to keep decreasing in pattern. Alright, just work across the front. that stitch is going to be fiddly. All right, and I'm ready to do the decreases on this side again as well, and we'll take another look at those. I'm going to bring my needle up. And you can see my decrease line is developing over here also. I'm going to bring this needle around. I'm going to knit the first stitch. And I'm going to slip, slip, knit, and then finish the round. All right, as I said, I'm going to repeat this until I get down to about 22 stitches. As I said, it's possible that somewhere you may have picked up an uneven number somewhere. If you have that and it really bothers you, just do one more decrease on one side of on the side of your sock with too many stitches and not on the other. It'll all come out in the wash. When you're wearing your socks, nobody's really going to be able to tell that you have one more decrease on one side of your sock and not the other. And if it doesn't bother you, you can just go ahead and leave it and keep knitting in the round. All right, I'm going to continue this until I finish the gusset, and then I'll come back and we'll get working on the straight part of the foot, and I'll talk about that. I'm putting aside my yellow sock on my circular needles for just a minute because I wanted to talk to you about working socks and that heel gusset on a double pointed needle set. So you can see right here I have worked the cup of my heel. I had put the front of my sock on 2 double pointed needles. I found that gave me space to maneuver the heel. I could have slipped both of these stitches onto just one double pointed needle, and I could still do that to make it easier. And then I have my heel on this other one. So what I need to do now is pick up stitches. I have put my stitch marker in the center of my heel in the back, and I'm going to keep that there for now because that's going to help me find the beginning of my round. Okay, I can go ahead and pick up these stitches here on this edge, still using the same back needle. So I'm going to do that. Picking up exactly the same as I did on the other sock. Just pulling those stitches through. Again, this is called pick up and knit. And I want to make sure I'm pulling that yarn pretty tight because I don't want to cause gaps or tall stretched out stitches on this side. Okay. Come here and I'm going to come here, and you'll see this on my Fixing Mistakes video. I talk about why I'm doing that. All right, I've picked up that side and I'm ready to work across the front. Now I'm going to knit all of the sock instep stitches onto one double pointed needle. So I'm just going to knit across this first one. If you have a set of double points that have 5 needles, you can do that as well, splitting the front and the heels on separate needles. But this set that I have only has 4 double pointed needles, so I'm going to need all my needles. I got 1 needle free, and I'm going to go ahead and knit the socks stitches from this second needle onto my working needle here. Okay, all of my instep stitches are now on 1 needle. All of my picked up heel stitches and my back of heel stitches are on a second needle. I now have 2 needles free. Set one aside. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to pick up stitches for my next sock here. And I'm going to twist that stitch, close the gap there, and then I'm going to pick up in here. Okay, I'm going to pick up all down this side, every slip stitch, again pulling those pretty tight. I mean, you don't want to distort your stitches by pulling so tight, but you want to have a firm pickup. Okay. And I'm getting back to the top of my sock here. Last stitch there. Okay, count those. Okay, now comes the little bit fiddly part. I'm going to go ahead and knit half the socks, or all the stitches that are before this marker, onto the same needle as my pickup stitches. Oh, it looks like I missed a pickup. I'm going to drop back real quick and pick up one more stitch here, and my stitch here again, which I saved, and then I'm going to knit those stitches before the marker. They're all going to go on one needle, so I'm going to have my heel stitches distributed on 3 needles. Okay, now I have half my heel stitches on one needle here. I have half my heel stitches on the other needle, and I have my instep stitches on my 3rd needle up here. Okay, and now these needles are going to be numbered. This is needle 1, this is needle 2, and this is needle 3. These are the order I work them in. This stitch marker, which I'm about to lose, I'm going to have to take this off because the needles separate here, is the beginning of round now. So I can go ahead, and if I need a reminder, I can hook it around this first stitch to remind me where the beginning of my round is. Okay, and then I'm going to begin working down along the first side of my heel along needle 1. I'm going to work until I'm 3 stitches from the end of needle 1, and then I'm going to do the exact same decrease that I did on my circular needles. Knit 2 together. Try not to lose my needle there. Okay, and then I'm going to knit the last stitch on my needle. All right, first needle's complete. Knit across my instep stitches. Again, I'm bringing this needle for my instep stitches to the top so that I can minimize the gap between needles. Don't want to start getting jogs here. This is going to be the side of your foot. Knit across here, and I'm going to do the next round of decreases starting on the beginning of needle 3. Okay, I knit all the way across needle 2, and I'm going to come around here now on needle 3, and I'm going to work my mirrored decrease here. So I knit the first stitch, I'm going to slip, slip, pass those stitches back onto my left needle, knit the 2 together, and then continue knitting until the end of the round. And then, just like I did on my circular needles, round 1 is going to be the decrease round, where you decrease at the end of needle 1 and the beginning of needle 3. And then row 2, or the even numbered rows, are going to be plain knitting, where you're just going to knit across the round with no decreases. And you're going to alternate round 1 and round 2 until you have the same number of stitches on the heel of your sock as you do on your instep needle. You shouldn't be making any decreases on needle 2. Your decreases should all be at the end of needle 1 or the beginning of needle 3. All right, and we're just going to keep working this sock from here. All right, you can continue knitting your sock on the double pointed needles. You'll find that your heel stitches will be reduced by half, and so you'll get fewer and fewer stitches on the 2 double points, both numbers 1 and 3, and you'll have the same number on number 1, or on needle number 2. So what you're going to want to do is, once you've done all of your decreases, you're going to want to go ahead and redistribute the stitches on your needles so that you have an equal number, close to equal number, on all of your double pointed needles again. And I believe for these socks, that's going to be about 15 or 16 stitches per needle. So once I completed the round, I would go ahead and knit an extra half round between the start of needle 1 to the beginning of needle 2, and then I would move my beginning of round marker back to the beginning of needle 2, evenly distribute these stitches on 3 circular needles, and then I would keep knitting the foot. And you're going to knit that foot until it becomes time to do the toe decreases, and we'll talk about that in the next section with our circular needle sock. All right, and I've now completed my sock gusset. You can see my decreased stitches coming down here, away from the side of the heel flap. And I've come back to the beginning of the round. Now I'm going to change the location of the beginning of the round again. I'm going to go ahead and knit across this half of my heel once more. And then we're going to switch back to working straight in the round, no decreases. All right, you can see I've finished that. I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle through, and I now have an equal number of stitches on each needle again. I can go ahead next time I get back here, I can take the stitch marker out. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to continue and knit my sock in the round as I was doing for the calf. And I'm going to do that until I get down to where I want to start my toe. Now, when you start the toes of your socks, most people knit that until they are about 1.5 inches to 1.25 inches away from the end of their longest toe. And you can figure that out by either tracing your foot while standing on a piece of paper or on a piece of cardboard, and then you can cut that piece of cardboard out, and you can use that as a template. You can use a ruler to measure 1.5 inches away from the end of the toe and draw a line, and then you can knit your sock. Try it on your cardboard template by putting the heel portion into your sock, and you can measure to see where that sock is going to fall, and we'll look at that in the next video when I do the toe. Now, before I get to the toes, I'm going to have a little video in between that's going to come out next week for you to see some of the tips and tricks for fixing issues that happen as you're knitting socks. I've got some ways to help you fix that gap that we talked about between the needles on your heel flap. And I've got some, if you miss slipping a stitch on that when you're doing your heel flap, I have ways to fix that. We'll talk about drop stitches. We'll talk about if you have too tight a cast on, and a couple other things. So look for that. And then we'll get down to our toes and we'll do those decreases and our grafting. Happy knitting!